Imagine a general standing over a giant map. Colored arrows sweep across the table, units are neatly labeled, the plan is flawless, every movement is timed to the minute. Now cut to the battlefield an hour later. Radios are failing, units are lost in the smoke, someone misheard an order, and an enemy that shouldn't be there suddenly appears on the flank. That gap between the clean, perfect plan and the chaotic mess you're seeing, that's the fog of war. In this video, we're going to pull it apart. Why do plans collapse? How do some commanders still win when nothing goes as expected? And what can ordinary people learn from this for their own lives? At work, in crises, even in everyday decisions, when their own battle plans meet reality and start to fall apart. The phrase, "no plan survives contact with the enemy," gets thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean? In military theory, the fog of war is the uncertainty that clouds every decision: incomplete information, miscommunication, fear, noise, weather, plain bad luck. In the next 15 minutes, we'll trace this idea from classic thinkers like Clausewitz to real battles where beautifully written plans collided with brutal reality. We'll look at how modern armies try to pierce the fog with technology and why it never fully works. And most importantly, we'll pull out lessons you can apply to your own planning under pressure. If you're into strategy, history, or just want to think more clearly when things go sideways, stick around to the end. And if this kind of deep dive is your thing, consider subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss future breakdowns just like this one. Let's start with where the concept comes from. The term fog of war is closely associated with 19th century Prussian theorist Karl von Clausewitz. He didn't just mean literal smoke on the battlefield. He meant the mental fog created by uncertainty and fear. In his book on war, Clausewitz wrote that in war, everything is simple, but the simplest things are difficult. Marching a unit from A to B, on paper, easy. In reality, roads wash out, a guide gets lost, a messenger is delayed, a commander falls ill. Each tiny friction adds up until the precise arrows on a map become guesses. Clausewitz argued that great commanders aren't those with perfect plans, but those with the strength of character to act decisively despite incomplete information and to adapt when their beautiful plan disintegrates at first contact with reality. That insight still shapes military thought today. To understand why plans break, picture three overlapping problems: information, communication, and time. First, information. Commanders almost never know exactly where the enemy is, how strong they are, or what they're about to do. Reconnaissance is partial, sensors fail, and the enemy is actively trying to deceive you. Second, communication. Even if you have good information somewhere, it has to travel through people, radios, and stress. Messages get garbled, delayed, or selectively ignored. Third, time. The battlefield changes faster than the orders can be updated. By the time new information reaches the right decision maker, it might already be obsolete. Stack these together, and that crisp, synchronized timetable turns into a set of half-remembered intentions. The fog of war isn't just confusion. It's confusion that's constantly moving while you're trying to catch up and make life or death choices anyway. Now add humans. Even with perfect radios and drones, people themselves generate fog. Under fire, perception narrows. You miss details, exaggerate threats, or misread what you see. A soldier who thinks they're being flanked may shout a warning that ripples up the chain, altering an entire plan based on a misunderstanding. Confirmation bias kicks in. Commanders may interpret reports in ways that fit their expectations, ignoring inconvenient data. Fear and pride distort decisions. No one wants to admit they're lost or that an objective can't be taken. Then there's simple exhaustion. After 20 hours awake, the smartest officer can misread a map or mix up coordinates. Multiply this across hundreds or thousands of people, all stressed, all tired, all acting and reacting, and you get a constantly shifting cloud of half-truths. Technology can transmit information faster, but it can't automatically make humans think more clearly under pressure. Let's ground this in a real example. Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany's 1941 invasion of the Soviet Union. On paper, it was a massive, meticulously timed plan involving millions of troops and 3 army groups racing toward key cities. Initial success fed the illusion that the plan was working perfectly. But as German forces pushed deeper, the fog thickened. Supply lines stretched. Fuel and ammunition reports became unreliable. Soviet units that were assumed destroyed reappeared unexpectedly. Weather and terrain slowed movements far more than predicted. At higher headquarters, Hitler and his generals received fragmentary, sometimes overly optimistic reports. They clung to the original plan long after conditions had changed. The result was a series of catastrophic misjudgments, including underestimating Soviet reserves and the impact of winter. Barbarossa shows how even a detailed plan can become a trap when leaders can't, or won't, update their mental picture through the fog. Fog of war isn't always about huge campaigns. Sometimes it's painfully personal. Consider the Battle of Saipan in World War II. U.S. Marines landed with clear objectives and detailed beach diagrams. But once the first waves hit shore, reality shredded those diagrams. Currents pushed landing craft off course, units mixed together, and pre-landing bombardments missed key Japanese positions. Individual platoon leaders often had no idea where adjacent units were, only that they were taking fire from unexpected directions. Radios failed or were submerged. Hand signals vanished in smoke and confusion. Decisions came down to whoever was physically present and conscious enough to act. Some small unit leaders improvised brilliantly, turning local chaos into footholds. Others froze, waiting for orders that would never arrive. Saipan illustrates that the fog of war isn't abstract. It's the lived experience of not knowing who's alive, where the enemy is, or what's happening 10 meters away.
So, how do militaries try to cut through this fog? One key tool is reconnaissance. Scouts, drones, satellites, and electronic surveillance all aim to answer basic questions. Where is the enemy? What are they doing? And what might they do next? Modern forces layer sensors so that if one fails, another might catch something. But sensing is only half the battle. The other half is fusing that data into a picture humans can use. This is where command centers come in, with massive screens and maps updating in real time. Yet paradoxically, more information can create its own fog, an overload of raw data that obscures what actually matters. The challenge is turning noise into insight quickly enough to act. In later segments, we'll see that the most effective commanders don't just demand more data. They demand better questions and simpler, clearer ways of seeing what's really happening.
There's another approach: accept that the fog will never fully lift and design your whole system around adaptation. This is where the OODA loop comes in. Observe, orient, decide, act, developed by U.S. Air Force Colonel John Boyd. The idea is simple. In a rapidly changing fight, the side that can cycle through this loop faster and more accurately gains the edge. Observe. Gather what's really happening, not what you wish were happening. Orient. Interpret it using your experience, training, and intuition. Decide. Choose a course of action. Act. Carry it out. And then immediately observe the new situation you've created. The fog of war never stops moving, so you keep looping. Commanders who cling to a detailed initial plan often slow their own OODA loop. Those who empower subordinates to make decisions locally can react faster, confusing opponents who are still trying to execute yesterday's orders. Mission command is one doctrine built around this idea. Instead of micromanaging every movement, higher commanders give clear intent, what needs to be achieved and why, but leave the how to lower levels. In a foggy, fast-changing fight, A platoon leader on the ground might see an opportunity or threat that headquarters can't. If they understand the overall intent, they can improvise without waiting for permission. This approach was heavily developed by the German army in the 19th and early 20th centuries and later adapted by many modern militaries. It accepts that centralized control breaks down when radios fail, leaders are hit, or the battlefield shifts unexpectedly. Mission Command tries to turn fog into fuel for initiative, trusting trained professionals to think up and out instead of just following a script. It's messy and risky, but so is pretending your perfect plan will survive first contact unchanged. Technology promises to lift the fog, but it also creates new forms of it. Take the 1991 Gulf War. Coalition forces had unprecedented satellite imagery, precision-guided munitions, and real-time intelligence. Compared to earlier wars, commanders had a much clearer sense of where Iraqi units were and how the campaign was unfolding. Yet even then, misidentifications happened, friendly fire incidents occurred, and the infamous Highway of Death raised ethical questions that weren't fully visible from the screen-filled command posts. In later conflicts, like in Afghanistan and Iraq, the saturation of drones and sensors sometimes produced what soldiers called a God's eye illusion, the sense that you understood more than you actually did. Small, close-range decisions like reading a crowd's mood or a village elder's intentions remained stubbornly human and ambiguous. The fog shifted from where are they to who are they and what are they really doing. Not all fog comes from the enemy. Sometimes it comes from your own side. Operation Eagle Claw, the failed 1980 U.S. mission to rescue hostages in Iran, is a stark example. The plan relied on precise timing and coordination between helicopters and transport aircraft across long distances and harsh desert conditions. On paper, it worked. In reality, dust storms, literal fog, reduced visibility. Mechanical issues grounded aircraft. Communication between different branches was patchy, and the complex contingency plans couldn't keep up with cascading failures. At the staging site, commanders faced conflicting reports, dwindling options, and intense political pressure. They aborted, but a tragic collision during withdrawal killed 8 servicemen. Eagle Claw shows how organizational complexity, inter-service rivalries, and over-ambitious planning can thicken the fog. It's not just bad luck. It's how fragile, tightly coupled, high-stakes operations become when any one link breaks. So what does all of this mean outside of war? Think of any big project, a startup launch, a disaster response, even planning a major event. You make a plan based on assumptions about customers, weather, supply chains, people's behavior. The moment you start, reality pushes back. Suppliers are late, key staff gets sick, a regulation changes, or your competitor does something you didn't expect. That's your civilian fog of war. The lesson isn't don't plan, it's plan with the fog in mind. Build margins for error. Define intent clearly so teams can adapt without asking permission. Create fast feedback loops, your own OODA cycles, so you notice when assumptions break. And cultivate a culture where people can report bad news early without fear. The same principles that help commanders survive battlefield chaos can help leaders navigate market shocks and personal crises more intelligently. Let's consolidate the big ideas. First, the fog of war is about uncertainty, friction, and human limits. Perfect information is impossible. Even with advanced tech, you'll never see everything clearly. Second, battle plans fail not because planning is useless, but because plans are guesses about a future that will change the instant you act. The real skill is adapting faster and more intelligently than your opponent or your environment. Third, structures like Mission Command and tools like the OODA loop exist to turn local knowledge and initiative into an advantage inside that fog. They accept confusion as the default and design around it. Finally, the same dynamics play out in civilian life, from corporate strategy to emergency response to your own personal goals. If you expect things to go wrong,
Build flexible plans and keep updating your picture of reality. You're already thinking like a seasoned commander. If this deep dive helped you see battle plans and your own plans a little differently, here's what you can do next. First, apply the idea this week. Pick one project in your life and explicitly list your assumptions. Then ask, what if I'm wrong? And sketch a simple backup move. That's you training your personal OODA loop. Second, if you enjoy breaking down strategy, history, and decision-making like this, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you catch future episodes. We'll be exploring more real operations, from brilliant improvisations to tragic miscalculations, and extracting lessons you can actually use. Finally, share this video with someone who loves war history or works in high-pressure environments. Military, medicine, startups, anywhere the fog of uncertainty is real. The more we understand how plans fail, the better we get at succeeding anyway, when reality inevitably refuses to follow the script.